Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. I'm Kamenenchev with Tom Castleman here. We are ready for an awesome show. There's a lot to go over. We've got our NFL midseason awards, just a few of them. MVP, Coach of the Year, Most Impressive Team in a good way, and Most Disappointing Team in a bad way. Surprises in a good and bad way. Going to be a huge show today. College football playoff top four is out. I don't know about the top four being a lot of question marks, but some of the other things are very interesting when it comes to some of the teams slotted in that 5 to 10 range. We'll get into that as well. We've got a World Series recap, maybe a little bit of NBA talk, betting locks of the week, sports trivia. I got a good one for you today, Tom. Going to be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to this show. I know next week we've got the World Cup preview. The GOAT Messi going to win one this year. Going to be a lot of fun. How are you doing today, Tom?
Doing very well, Common. Hope everybody watching and listening to the show today is doing well also. And yeah, we're at the midseason point in the NFL, and it's kind of nice to do a little bit of this midseason part recap, but part award because, quite frankly, we've had a couple of shows where we just have not been able, or a couple of weeks where we have not been able to get together to have shows. So it's good to kind of touch base, look around the league a little bit, and figure out, okay, where are things so far as the storylines go? Who are we giving awards to midseason? And then, maybe we can talk a little bit about projecting that forward. And of course, the biggest one to talk about is the MVP award. Essentially, insert quarterback of the year here type of thing is how the award pretty much has been going. I mean, if Cooper Kupp having an all-time season as a wide receiver can't win MVP, I don't know how a position outside a quarterback can win it. So I think that there's a couple of different options for people to go. Josh Allen, I think, starting out the season was, the prohibitive betting favorite. I think I had him as my MVP pick still in the running. Comment. I'm not sure if you also went with him or if you went with your guy, Patrick Mahomes.
You know who I went with.
I'm sure we are going to hear about plenty in this show. You were able to sneak him into the rundown last week, and I know that he's going to get plenty of time as well. So,
you will.
Common, why is Patrick Mahomes your MVP halfway through the NFL season?
Yeah, real quick, there's three legitimate candidates. There's a couple other outside guys. I mean, Tua's missed a few games, but he's got to be in the running. I think that Geno Smith is doing great. You want to go outside the quarterback position. Saquon Barkley doing really good. But if you read about anything in your reel, it's really going to go down to three guys: Mahomes, Allen, and Jalen Hurts. So first off, if Allen misses any time due to injury, he could be toast in that race. Wish for all the best health in Josh Allen. I know he may or may not play this Sunday, but as for why Mahomes is the MVP, well, Allen and Mahomes have kind of a similar numbers type thing. If you're going to go for record, you may like Hurts, but if you're going off numbers, right now Mahomes leads the NFL in passing yards, passing touchdowns, ahead of Josh Allen in both categories. He's got a better QBR. He's got a better passer rating. And Mahomes' team overall, counting the defense, not as good as Josh Allen's. I know that he lost head-to-head, but Allen and Mahomes are both 6-2, and I think Mahomes is doing a little bit more with less, and that was very evident in that Tennessee game. Chiefs had so many badly timed penalties. It's like 10-yard gain here, taken off the board due to a flag. Even Travis Kelce was dropping passes, going for picks the other way. Mahomes could have been sacked like 8 or 9 times in that game. I think he took 4 sacks total, but he was escaping, running around like crazy. That last game against Tennessee was why he is the MVP. His running backs had 13 carries for 14 yards. Defense was in his face. Titans knew what they were going to do, and they still couldn't stop him. More than 500 total yards, 6 carries, 63 yards a run, more than 10 yards a carry. KC has the highest scoring offense in the NFL right now, better than the Bills, better than the Eagles, despite not having a great defense. I mean, KC has allowed 54 more points than they have Buffalo, and 81 more points, or 54 more than the Eagles, 81 more than the Bills. So their defense definitely not doing as good. So numbers-wise, Mahomes has Allen beat. If we're going to go to record, Hurts is 8-0, but their schedule has been easier. He's got a better run game, a better defense. Jalen Hurts is obviously very valuable, but he is not contributing as much to these Eagle wins as some of these other guys are. I mean, Mahomes has 21 passing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts has 12. That's almost double. I know Jalen has a few more rushing touchdowns, etc. But Mahomes has considerably better numbers, considerably better touchdown and yard contributions than Hurts does. I mean, it's not even close statistically. Even if you add in the rush yards and the rushing touchdowns, Mahomes still has him beat by a pretty big margin. With Allen, the margin is close, but it's still in Mahomes' favor. I just think that his overall team isn't as good. We're talking about most valuable. We can't just get hung up on the offense. Think about the defense. KC's defense, which, by the way, gets better the second half of the season. It's a weird thing. First half of the season, Chiefs are always like an average, mediocre defense. Second half, all of a sudden, while not the best defense, they're an above average, pretty good defense. So as that D gets better the second half of the year, the Chiefs will get better. But Mahomes, I think, just does more. He runs around and makes passes. Like Josh Allen, the difference between Mahomes and Allen is just as good throwing the ball in the pocket. He's just as good of an arm. He's a better physical runner, but Mahomes is a much better ad-libber than Josh Allen. You look at Josh Allen when he tries to throw on the run, what happens? He throws picks a lot of times. When Mahomes tries to throw on the run, he gets like crazy passes left and right. So Mahomes has the number, he's got the eye test, and he's got the worst team of these three guys. That for me is why he is the MVP. And before this last week, I would have said that it was very close. Watching how Allen's played the last 2 weeks and watching how great Mahomes was against Tennessee, I would say right now, like it's relatively close, but Mahomes to me is the clear front runner. And even if you look at the betting favorites and who the favorites are right now, Mahomes is the slight favorite at the moment.
Yeah, I knew you were going to go with Patrick Mahomes on this discussion on this one, so I'm going to give a little bit more shine on Jalen Hurts as my pick of the MVP halfway through the season, because he's basically the embodiment of what happens when you put actual investment around your quarterback, around your team. We see a guy who has talent in Jalen Hurts actually be able to flourish and show a little bit more now that he has A.J. Brown as an established number one receiver. Devontae Smith, I know coming out of college, didn't really put up like wide receiver one numbers, but obviously won a Heisman, very talented guy.
He did in his last season, absolutely.
He was pretty good last year. Like he wasn't like Jamar Chase.
You're talking about
level.
His rookie season. I thought you were talking about his college. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're
like
saying.
as a pro, like he is shown that he's a good receiver, but not necessarily great yet. I know it's non-linear with receivers. Some of them take an extra year or two to show that. There's a lot of different functions that go into that. But it's in part the storyline. What are voters going to love? If the season were to end today, if it were only an 8 or 9 game season, they would say, "Hey, quarterback putting up great numbers for the undefeated team." I don't think obviously Eagles are going to go undefeated on the entire season, but if they were, even if Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen have better numbers than Jalen Hurts, so long as he's comparable with them, he's going to get some of that MVP love. And that factors in a little bit where if you want to do the whole take a quarterback out of the offense, what do you get? I think in all three situations with these front runners, you have a much inferior product. So I think right now, with Patrick Mahomes as the betting favorite on the market, he certainly does deserve midseason MVP accolades. He's going to get for the full regular season. He's definitely going to be up there. I'm going with Jalen Hurts just because he contributes a lot on the ground. He gives a little bit of a different look as far as the type of offense. With Patrick Mahomes, when he's more scrambling than he is designed running. And so as a defense, you do have to account for that sort of thing. Whereas with Jalen Hurts, there's a lot more intention to the run and just a different dimension that he provides that offense. So I'm going to go with a really good quarterback on the currently undefeated team in the NFL as my pick for MVP. But I don't think you can go wrong with any of these three guys because they've shown all throughout the season how important they are, both with their arms, with their legs, with their intellect, with their mind, being able to read defenses. And we're seeing the growth in Jalen Hurts, not terribly dissimilar from the growth that we saw in Josh Allen. And I don't know if you necessarily would say growth for Patrick Mahomes, but, he had that 1 year where he was sitting behind Alex Smith, and we've seen, not necessarily on the field him struggle kind of at the start of his career, but the growth that you can take just being in the NFL and learning. So it's fascinating with the way that this MVP conversation has developed over time as well. I mean, we used to be talking about Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, as these top MVP candidates. Now we're seeing guys that can do it with the arm, with the legs, and it's really, really, I think, fun to see, quite frankly, in the NFL. But for me, Jalen Hurts is my pick as midseason MVP.
Yeah, a couple points. These are the DraftKings MVP odds. Mahomes plus 200, Jalen Hurts plus 250, Josh Allen plus 350.
That sounds right, yeah.
And actually, Caesar Sportsbook has Mahomes 200, Allen 225, Hurts 250. So it's not like Mahomes is so far ahead. I mean, all three are relatively close as far as favorites go. So this race is wide open, just a couple points. By the way, you're completely right. We have all these other like legends leaving the game. We got so many other good ones. I mean, Tua, Joe Burrow, these guys are balling out as well. But it's a three-man race. You talked a lot about like what happens when you add a player, you know, to improve your quarterback, which the Dolphins did, which the Eagles did. That makes sense. What did Kansas City do? They subtracted a player. I know they added maybe more depth at that receiver position.
Sure, yeah.
But Mahomes just lost Tyreek Hill. And the fact that he's been able to put up such numbers. I mean, Tyreek Hill right now is on pace for the all-time receiving yards mark, in NFL history. He's on pace to go for over 2,000 receiving yards. His value is very obvious. And I think that Mahomes is essentially doing more with less. I mean, I know Kelsey is amazing, but to be honest with you, I think that Allen and Hurts may have slightly better overall players on offense even. And we're looking at what Mahomes lost and what he's doing, and he is better overall as a quarterback. The NFL is a league of adjustments. I think the first season when Patrick Mahomes came in, no one was ready for him. I mean, that was his best season statistically, one of the best seasons ever. I mean, only 2 seasons ever we've had a guy get 50-plus touchdowns, 5,000 plus yards. It was Peyton Manning in that 55 touchdown season with the Broncos, and then Patrick Mahomes. It was statistically the second best or best season ever. I don't know if he's ever going to replicate that statistically, but now we've seen teams, they drop back more. They don't let him have the deep ball as much as they used to, and that was a little bit of an adjustment at the first half of last year. You look at the back half of last year, Mahomes was the best player in the NFL, no question. So while the league adjusted to him, he's now adjusting to the league. So his numbers may not be quite what they were, even though they are still phenomenal, still best in the league. But overall, I agree he's a better player. But I think he can just do more than these two guys. He's more valuable. And, he loses the Tyreek Hill, and he hasn't skipped a beat. If anything, he's gotten better, which is scary for the league. But this race will definitely be one to follow. If the Eagles go undefeated, Hurts will get it, but I'm not banking on the Eagles going undefeated. So give me Mahomes to win this MVP come the end of the season. If it's very close, though, he will lose the tiebreaker to both of these guys. So he's got to be definitely the best to get the MVP because he already has one. Allen doesn't have one. Yeah. Hurts doesn't have one. But I do think that Mahomes will be a clear step above, not like 2 steps, but a step above by season's end.
Well, and talking about making adjustments and everything, that's the thing that's going to be interesting to watch with Jalen Hurts as we get farther into this season because, this year, his touchdown to interception rate is great. He's only thrown 2 picks all season long. What are teams going to do to adjust to him a little bit this year? I know he's been in the league, so folks know what he's capable of, but NFL it's a bunch of punches and counter punches. We're going to see if teams on the schedule, Dallas is going to obviously be a big challenge with the way that their defense has played this year. They're going to be able to challenge Jalen Hurts. So it's going to be interesting Giants. To see if he's able to maintain this throughout the rest of the season, if he's going to be as efficient, as careful, as safe with the ball. Oddly enough, for running quarterback, I know these are very, very small differences, but I think he's a couple points better on passer rating of all stats over Patrick Mahomes. And of course, Mahomes is throwing the ball a lot more, so more opportunity for interceptions. There's a little bit more variance in there. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens as we head down the home stretch. Another category in which we're seeing adjustments of, punch, counter punch is obviously with coaching. And I think there are any number of candidates. I know with MVP, we kind of have a big 3, but for me, I wrote down just off the top of my head, okay, who's my pick for coach of the year? But then digging into it, it's I could honestly go for four guys once I put just
Hmm.
a little bit more thought. And
Yeah.
even beyond that, you can continue to kind of go down the list and say, who's the best coach of the year? I've gotten five names, and I'm not even touching on Nick Sirianni. Who's the head coach of the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles? So, Common, who is your pick? And if you want to throw out some honorable mentions, I'm good with that too, because I've got a couple of guys on my list as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got four names written down. By the way,
Mhm.
Mahomes a little bit ahead of Jalen Hurts on QBR. Jalen Hurts slightly ahead on passer rating, but numbers are pretty close on those two. So it depends on which metric you look at. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, and to your point, real quickly on Hurts, I will say this too: the NFL is adjusting to him as a runner. Now they have to adjust to him as a passer because he's greatly improved this passing game. AJ Brown helps, but just in general seems like a more accurate quarterback because last year he had open receivers, he missed them. This year he has open
Mhm.
receivers, he's hitting them. As far as the coaches, this is wide open. By the way, Nick Sirianni is the betting favorite, but there's like three other guys who are pretty even as far as second betting favorite. So, or four other guys even. So these are the candidates for me, the legit candidates. Nick Sirianni obviously is the big one. His Eagles are undefeated. We have Kevin O'Connell of the Vikings. They're 7-1. Robert Saleh has the Jets at 6-3. Brian Daboll, first-year coach for the Giants, has him at 6-2. And a lot of those guys are new coaches, first-year, second-year coaches, as head coaches in the NFL. They haven't had like any head coaching experience. Brian Daboll, I think it's his first year. Saleh, I think, is in year two with the Jets. And then Pete Carroll's the veteran, longtime vet, has the Seahawks 6-3 and atop the NFC
Mhm.
West. So any one of these guys is pretty close. I really have no issue with any one of them winning MVP or MVP, Coach of the Year. They're all so good.
MVC.
MVC. I will say Nick Sirianni, even though the betting favorite, I will say he's not the coach of the year because he has by far the best roster of these other coaches. Philly was in the playoffs last year. They had a winning record. They added AJ Brown. They got some
Mhm.
good draft picks in the draft. And simply, Jalen Hurts has another year to improve. No matter how, what you do as a coach, what you do as a player, when you're a young guy, less than 4 years in the league, year three, year four, you will improve. So that has to be accounted for as well. So, I mean, it's tough to say that a coach is undefeated or remove him from coach of the year, but I think some of these other teams have bigger jumps. For example, the Seahawks are better, but Seattle wasn't as bad as people thought they were. They were a 7-win team last year with injuries in what was maybe the best division in football. So Pete Carroll, again, in the running. He's got him at 6 wins already. But I think the Seahawks roster is a lot better than people give it credit for.
Mm.
And again, they haven't improved as much. The Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, absolutely in the running. Minnesota 7-1, but they've played some teams at the right time. Some quarterbacks have been hurt against them, and they have a pretty good roster too. Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook. You get a healthy Vikings team. They have a squad that's been in the playoffs in recent seasons. So for me, it really goes down to two guys, and those three other guys I listed, they are so close. Those are my honorable mentions. But the two it goes down to is the two New York coaches. We
Mhm.
have Brian Daboll and Saleh with the Jets. So both of these teams had 4 wins last year. They both already have 6 so far. So they've already outgained the win total. These guys are great. I'm going to go with Brian Daboll for 2 reasons. So I think it's very impressive that he's doing this in his first year. Saleh, obviously a fantastic coach. He was there last year.
Mhm.
He's in that coaching culture. So you really can't go wrong with him for sure. I'm going with Daboll for 2 reasons. He's brand new this year. It completely changed the culture. And also the Giants have a plus 6 point differential, but they're 6-2. What does that tell you? That tells you that they know how to win close games. What matters in close games? A lot of it is coaching. Brian Dable seems to always push the right buttons when the game is close. I know he's got coordinators, et cetera. It's not all on him, but he's ultimately the face of the team. So he's got to be my coach of the year, but this race is so close. Any one of those guys I listed could win. That race could definitely change, but this is the midseason award, Tom
Hmm.
Castleman. At the midseason mark, Giants are 6-2, Jets are 6-3. New York has a better winning percentage. Give me the Giants and Brian Daboll for coach of the year at the midseason mark.
Yeah, for me, this was a challenging one to kind of go over, just because how many good efforts are being put in. I mean, you mentioned everybody that was on my list as far as coach of the year, as well as honorable mention. The only one that I have to add is Mike Vrabel, and maybe this is a little bit of confirmation bias on my part, but I didn't
Don't
think that the
disagree.
Titans were very good coming in this year, as far as their talent goes, and in spite of not really having a quarterback, not really having receivers, not really having, really great guys individually on defense. Really, you can name one really good player on the Titans roster, that is Derrick Henry. In spite of all of that, the Titans are atop the NF or the AFC South. They lost, on a really gutsy call from Brian Dable in week one, converting a 2-point conversion. So that's a loss. Obviously, getting blown out on the road in Buffalo week two. And then, quite frankly, this isn't college. There are no such thing as good losses when it comes into factoring stuff. But keeping that game in Kansas City, as close as it was, for
With
what,
Malik
like
Willis.
3 quarters plus of the game. It wasn't until like the last half of the last quarter that Kansas City was really able to pull away. I mean, that's just an outstanding coaching effort on Mike Vrabel's part. I don't think that he's going to win it this year, but he's certainly worthy of an honorable mention on my part. For me, there's so many different ways I could go with my coach of the year, but I think I'm going to go with Pete Carroll, simply for the fact of he's playing, he's coaching in a pretty tough division. But essentially, what he's done is this is a really rare thing. He's taken a 31, 32-year-old Geno Smith, who was given, a high draft pedigree, but never really kind of figured things out. He's taken him and made him into a really good quarterback this year. We were talking about the midseason MVP. You could easily make a case for Geno Smith. I think we didn't,
Sure.
because we dismiss him as far as not being as talented. And he's not really as talented as Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. But if you were to just say, hey, player A, player B, player C, player D, Geno Smith deserves to be in that conversation for sure. And at no point in his career has he really exhibited any of that, quite frankly. So I think that just the job that Pete Carroll has done coaching up this team, a team that, all across the NFL, pundits were saying this is the fourth place team. This isn't even a discussion, really. It's going to be, who's going to battle it out? Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay for the top of the division. Are the Cardinals going to be able to overcome being doofuses and actually win some football games when it
No,
matters? Like,
no.
nobody was talking about Seattle, and here they are halfway through the season, atop a division that we thought was, a really, really tough, really, really talented division. And I think it still is. It definitely still has that upside, even if, NFC has kind of risen up with their record, and the AFC West is a challenging division as well. Although, Broncos and Raiders certainly not delivering the way a lot of us thought they would. For me, it's Pete Carroll, simply for the job that he's done on the Seahawks so far this season. And I think, kind of looking at the schedule, has plenty of opportunities to continue proving himself. Big game in Germany against Tampa Bay this Sunday. Obviously, still have a couple of games in division where they got to play the Rams twice. They got to play the 49ers again. Going on the road to Kansas City, that's going to be a big proving one as well. I think that there's definitely room for Pete Carroll to actually be in the conversation toward the end of the year as well. But he's my midseason nod. And absolutely no shade thrown to Brian Dable, who's done a fantastic job as a first-year guy. I mean, Robert Saleh just doing this well with the Jets might be enough to get him that award. But if we're looking at like the schedules that other teams have played, Giants have had a fairly decent, easy cakewalk type of thing, where they lost the head to Seattle, lost to a really talented Dallas team, but they've been beating up on the Bears, the Packers, the Jaguars, the Panthers. not really great teams on their schedule. A couple of good ones, with a win over Baltimore and Tennessee, obviously. But I just think, Pete Carroll has done a fantastic job. And so I put him like slight edge above Dable, slight edge above Robert Saleh.
Yeah, quickly on a couple of things you said. First off, the Mike Vrabel stuff you said, 100% agree. Mike Vrabel
Mhm.
is entering like he's a little bit behind these guys, but you have like your Andy Reid, you've got your Bill Belichick, where we know those guys can coach.
Mhm.
Even if like Bill Belichick has lost a bit, I'm not sure that he's lost that much. I think it's just the roster. So in any given season, name your top NFL coaches. Andy Reid, Bill Belichick could obviously be in that discussion. They could be in coach of the year discussion any season. I think Mike Vrabel is entering that category. I know he hasn't done it in the playoffs as much as those guys, but he also hasn't had the roster those
Mhm.
guys have had. So 100% agree with what you said about Mike
He's
Vrabel.
he's like Mike Tomlin territory
Yes.
type of thing, where he is
Yeah.
just consistently good every single year. I mean, I'm looking at the Steelers record right now, and it's I really wanted this
First
to
time he'll be
continue.
under 500, Mike Tomlin. First time in his
Unless
career.
he's able to pull up on the reins. I mean, looking at the schedule,
They
I mean, you
won't.
got to handle it's going to be a bit of a
It's going to
rough
be
go to
tough.
try to get it. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to
So,
all good things come to an end. But yeah, Mike Vrabel, Mike Tomlin, they were like right there in terms
yeah.
of they can do anything with anything. Forget about it.
Fantastic coaches. Just real quickly on your point on Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. First off, I agree with what you're saying. No doubt agree with it. I will say one thing about Geno Smith,
Hmm.
though, and I know he played last year. He didn't play as good as he's playing right now, but obviously it's different when you get used to the system, when you get used to the players, when you have actually played in the games and you've had the offseason to prepare. I'm not trying to make an excuse for Geno Smith, but we talk about situations. I mean, we've got the all-time great quarterbacks, like Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, maybe those are like all-time talents,
Hmm.
Brady, Manning, Breeze, etc. But as you like to say, you win because of a guy, you win, he's just there, then you like win despite him.
Hmm.
And Geno Smith is in probably that middle category. He's like a
This
he's
season,
a
yeah.
yeah, well, this season, but like look at what he's had before. He's played on the Giants when they were bad, when Eli Manning, granted, past his prime, but Eli Manning couldn't do anything with the Giants. The Jets have been horrendous. I mean, there has not been weapons out there. So I know it sounds like we're making an excuse. I do think that Pete Carroll has definitely contributed to Geno Smith playing better. I'm not saying he hasn't, but maybe we've slept on Geno all this time just because he has not been in good
Hmm.
situations. You look at Seattle all of a sudden, he's got DK Metcalf, he's got Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker, a great rookie running back. He's got weapons he's never had before. So an average quarterback, a mediocre quarterback can become a good quarterback with weapons. An average quarterback without weapons could be one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. So Geno maybe was one of the worst starting QBs in the NFL because he didn't have guys around him. So some of that I think has to be the circumstances, but Pete Carroll definitely has contributed to those circumstances by putting the environment and coaching them up the right way. But I think Seattle just is not as bad of a football team as people thought. Again, this
Hmm.
team last year with injuries in the best division in football had 7 wins, 7-10. They were not miserable. The Giants and Jets were miserable. Also, the NFC West, not the same division it was. The Rams right now are middling. I think it's not fair to say that it's the same division as last year. 49ers have had so many injuries. They might regroup with McCaffrey, Debo healthy together. The Cardinals, I don't even know what they're doing. The Cardinals are toast. They're not doing anything. So, you talk about the Giants' soft schedule. I agree. It hasn't been great, but their division is actually better than the NFC West right now. The AFC East with Robert Saleh coaching, everyone's over 500. So we'll see what happens. Again, all these guys are great candidates. I just think the New York coaches are doing more with less. I think Seattle was just slept on as a squad because this is one of the best franchises in football over the last 10 years. I think last year was one of, if not the first losing season they've had in forever. And we just dismissed them. And I think we shouldn't have done that. Pete Carroll, definitely a great coach. I just think he's got better guys around him than either of those New York coaches do. But to your point, maybe those New York teams do fade the second half. Maybe the fact that Carroll has better players puts him in that coach of the year running. I do think Nick Sirianni is going to win because the Eagles go like 15-2. He'll win Coach of the Year even if he doesn't deserve it. That's the guy who's going to win. I'm going Brian Daboll personally. Great debate though. Could go with
Absolutely.
any one of these guys.
Yeah, and just kind of like spinning off that into the next topic is most surprising team. And I think that really between, it's the same thing. Those three coaches, you could say those three teams. I think at least for me, like it's really hard to pick between Seahawks, Giants, and Jets as like most surprising team in a good way this season. I think I might have to go with Jets on this one just because they have been a laughing stock for so long. And we looked at that division. We said, obviously, Buffalo Bills, they're going to be winning it hands down. Miami invested heavily in Tua Tagovailoa by bringing in Tyreek Hill, by kind of revamping this offense, just giving him really good weapons and a nice zone run scheme that he can work some play action off of. Just kind of just go with him. So Miami's going to be a good team. New England, they have Bill Belichick. Even if their talent isn't necessarily on par, he's going to find those little advantages. And then we said, New York Jets. They're like really, really good this year.
Yeah.
And they had some, I think, like statement wins. You look at that massive, massive surprising comeback that they had in Cleveland, winning that one 31-30. I think I remember somebody saying something about a culture builder, something that is, a foundational
piece. Is that
piece.
you, Tom?
That was me.
There you go.
It may have been. It may have been a foundational piece for a culture going forward. And what do we see after that? They take care of business against a not great Pittsburgh team, but beating Miami at home. I don't think Tua was playing in that game.
He wasn't. But they won big.
Still, to win 40-17, to have wins on the road against Green Bay, who we're finding out may not be all that great, to have a road win against Denver, and then, of course, another signature win, so to speak, at home against Buffalo, where they win 20-17. Second time this season for Buffalo, where they're kind of in these close games against divisional opponents and are coming up a little short, which is something that is kind of a bit of an odd feeling for a team that's kind of like fait accompli, that they are going to be winning the division and
Mahomes
advancing
MVP.
far.
Where's Allen in these close games against division opponents? Give me Mahomes the MVP, baby. Come on, Tom.
So give me the Jets as the most surprising team this season with some signature wins over really, really tough opposition. I mean, looking at that first week, you lose to Baltimore 24-9. It's just like, yep, here's going to be another season where the Jets might have some flashes. They might show some individual talent, but to actually take that together and put it into cohesive wins, Jets are the most surprising team for me halfway through the season. And looking at their schedule, they could be, continuing to surprise. I know that I think we put them as most likely to be fluky in our last show, but that was before they went out and beat Buffalo. So what do we know?
So what do we know, Tom? What does anyone know in the NFL this year? It is just crazy. Upsets left and right. Honestly, it's funny to think about this, Tom. Last year I said that I'd seen the most upsets in NFL history. This year, there's even more. And I think it's easy to look at like a team like the Chiefs. Like, I think, Jake Schlegel texted me something like, one of my college buddies, the Chiefs are not dominating teams anymore. And it's like, what's wrong with the Chiefs? Like, have they gotten worse? And to be honest with you, I think the rest of the NFL has just gotten better. I mean, we have all these advanced analytics. We've got all these big departments, all this video. You have worse records. You have higher draft picks. And I think we're seeing a lot of these teams really like make those mistakes into better corrections. And teams who are used to being bad, everyone is just better. The whole league is closer. The worst teams are closer to the best teams more so than ever, honestly. So as far as the most surprising team in a good way, I mean, it is kind of down to those same three teams we talked about, Coach of the Year, Seahawks, Jets, Giants. Vikings 7-1, a surprise. But like I said earlier, they do have more talent on that roster than those other teams. So it's going to be between the two New York teams. They had 4 wins each last year. I don't even have one written down. I guess I have Jets slightly more surprising because they beat the Bills is what I have written down. And they're on a better division than the Giants because the AFC East, as you said, complete juggernaut. But I think it has to be noted that the Jets and Giants are doing this with 2 young quarterbacks that, and maybe maybe the receivers are the problem. We don't know. Maybe these guys aren't Geno Smith because they don't have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But on paper, Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson, two of the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL. On paper, Jets and Giants, two of the worst passing teams in the NFL, two of the worst receiving cores, tight ends, etc. I mean, it's you win in the NFL by passing the ball, and neither of these teams pass at all. They've got good running backs, they've got good offensive lines, good defenses, good coaches, and that's what's winning them games. But I mean, who can you really name on these squads that really scares you on the outside? You really can't name anyone. I mean, the one guy, I guess it's the running backs. You know, Breece Hall and and he's hurt now, but Michael Carter did good this last week. And then obviously Saquon Barkley is great. But in the modern day NFL, you're telling me like Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson with a bunch of nobodies, and they're essentially like some of these guys. Was it Elijah Moore? Who's the receiver that's unhappy with the Jets? I think it might be him.
Pick one: Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims. There's any number.
Exactly.
Of guys.
So all these supposed young players are having issues with the team, despite the fact that they're winning, which is its own surprise in itself. And then the Giants that just got rid of Kadarius Toney, who again, hasn't been great in the NFL by any means, but on paper, probably their most talented receiver. I think Sterling Shepard, one of their top guys, got hurt, hasn't played this year, hardly if at all. And these teams are both 6-3, 6-2, respectively. They are both massive shocks. I guess I'll go with the Jets just slightly because the Giants, again, mostly a pretty good organization over the years. I know the Jets had that AFC championship with Mark Sanchez, but overall, the Jets have not been such a good franchise for a while now. The Giants are actually not that far removed from being good. Like, we've seen them win playoff games in the last 7-8 years. They've won Super Bowls within the last 15 years. So I'll go the Jets, slightly more surprising, but it's, again, tooth and nail. Jets and Giants, both the two massive shocks this season, for sure.
Yeah, and just as hotly contested as the most surprising team may be, I think we can have a lot of teams that are struggling or striving to be the most disappointing so far through this season. I mean, there's a couple different ways that you can go with this one. I mean, for me, putting everything together, I came up with 4 names. I'm sure we're going to have some overlap on a couple of them. But as far as a bad surprise team, Common, kind of who tops your list? Who's in that conversation for you?
Yeah, so I'll list off all the teams I've written down here. Packers are 3-6. Rams are 3-5. Bucks are 4-5 in a dreadful division with some bad losses. Broncos are 3-5. Raiders are 2-6. Those are the ones I've written down. I know the 49ers are 4-4, but they've had injuries, and I think they're on the right track.
As they do every year.
Yeah, they have every year, it seems like. So I excluded them off the list because they're at least 500. I looked at it, who's under 500? Packers, Rams, Bucks, Broncos, Raiders. So all massive disappointments. All of these teams, minus the Broncos, were playoff teams last year. And Denver added Russell Wilson, who was supposed to take them to the playoffs, take them over the top. So I'll start with Denver as the, I guess, least disappointing of these teams, just because they weren't in the playoffs last year. A quarterback can't fix all your issues, especially an older quarterback coming off an injury. So I think a lot of us maybe expected too much from Russell Wilson and Denver. Obviously, very disappointing. Broncos have had a lot of close games. They should be better than 3-5, but I mean, who's to forecast them making such a bad call at the coaching job? Who's to forecast Melvin Gordon fumbling so much, Javonte Williams getting hurt? A lot of things haven't gone right for Denver. So I think they're not quite in the same discussion as these other teams for me. Rams and Bucks, tons of talent. I mean, 2 of the Super Bowl favorites. I know on our show, we kind of labeled them as maybe the 2 Super Bowl favorites coming out of the NFC. So much talent, but again, they've had injuries, and they both lost key pieces from last year's team. I mean, I guess Allen Robinson, maybe it wasn't all Matt Nagy and the Bears, coaching staff. Maybe he was over the hill because having Odell Beckham as that second guy to Cooper Kupp did wonders for the Rams offense. I know they lost an offensive lineman. You talk a lot about him on the show. That hurts as well. And the Bucks lost an offensive lineman. One of their key players got hurt before the season. So those teams are obviously underachieving. You don't want to make excuses, but there are some personnel and some things that they've lost. So very disappointing. But the two most disappointing to me is between the Packers and the Raiders. Those are the two. Green Bay's 3-6. I know the Bucks lost to the Panthers, but Green Bay lost to the Detroit Lions, the worst statistical defense in the NFL. They scored 9 points on the Lions. 9 points on the Lions. You cannot score 9 points on the Lions in the NFL and have Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, look, losing Davante Adams hurts him. However, if you look at that tape of the Lions game, there are some passes he just threw to the other team. Of any quarterback in league history, Aaron Rodgers makes less bad mistakes than anyone ever. He's got the best touchdown to interception ratio of all time. He doesn't have as many yards as Mahomes, Brady, Manning. But as far as taking care of the ball, no one has done it better than Aaron Rodgers. He had, 3 picks in that game, I think? Mm-hmm. And a couple of them were just so bad that it wasn't on the receivers. It was on him just throwing to the other team. So the play of Aaron Rodgers is wildly disappointing. We talked about this last week. Like, who's more responsible, Brady or Rodgers, for the team's struggles? And I think I might have maybe answered wrongly saying Brady, because Rodgers has been we saw Brady come up clutch at the end. I actually watched the Bucks-Rams game, and Bucks have a lot of issues that go beyond Tom Brady. I actually hadn't seen them play as much, to be honest with you. I was like mind blown at just the timing of their penalties, their drops, etc. So disappointing as a team, but they're still 4-5. They're still winning the division. So it's between Green Bay and the Raiders. As disappointing as the Packers are at 3-6, I think the Raiders are the most disappointing team in the league. They're 2-6. Think about this. Davante Adams got subtracted from Green Bay. We couldn't have expected they would drop off this much, but certainly it was expected they would drop off a little bit. Those young receivers, that wasn't like some some breaking news that they didn't have the receiving core. Meanwhile, the Raiders are coming off a playoff season. They added Davante Adams, who is on paper one of, if not the best receiver in the NFL. You ask Madden, he's the best receiver in the NFL. That's what Madden thinks, for what it's worth. He's with his old college buddy, Derek Carr. These guys have wanted to play together for years, yet they're 2-6, and they've blown 3 leads of 17 points or more. That is the most disappointing thing right now, because Green Bay, they're just not good right now. Mm-hmm. The Raiders have talent. They've got Adams. They've got Josh Jacobs. If they don't blow 3 leads by 17 or more, instead of 2-6, they're 5-3. They lost by 1 point to the Chiefs. I mean, come on. What are the Raiders doing? All these teams we listed are very disappointing. For me, Raiders, most disappointing team in the NFL right now, even more so than the Packers, Rams, and Bucks, which are the obvious answers.
Let's see. Yeah, for me, I mean, I had a lot of the same disappointing teams, and basically the way I did it was I do have our preseason selections saved in my notes as far as who's going to be winning divisions, and basically looked at all of them and said, okay, who's coming up short? Obviously, the Buccaneers are a team that's on that list. Technically, though, still in the hunt because of a pretty weak division.
They're winning it.
Rams, they're winning it in very unconvincing fashion. Sure. I should say.
Yeah,
the Rams, of course, still obviously have a chance. There's a lot of season left. You got the 49ers at 4-4. You've got the Seahawks at 5-3. So there's still is it 6-3?
Yeah.
They haven't had their bye week yet. Yeah, thank you. So you can still have some room to make some maneuvers. I mean, I think Broncos are fairly disappointing just because we all kind of expected better. The whole thing that we've been hearing from them is they're just a quarterback away. They're just a quarterback away. Well, for all we know, they still might be a quarterback away with the way that things have gone with Russell Wilson. I think it's fair to kind of question where's his talent level at, and did Seattle pull off the ultimate finesse of give us all of your draft picks and we'll give you this QB who's not very good anymore. That's something that it's going to take a couple of years to suss that out, to see if this is a fluke, if this is just having an absolute dunce of a head coach. So Broncos pretty disappointing, of course. I mean, I love to thrash the Packers as much as the next person. I think that they're very disappointing as well. Started off 3-1. Hadn't looked great in a lot of those wins. I mean, if we look at their schedule, they have one convincing win, which is a 27-10 victory over the Chicago Bears. Other than that, 2-point win over Tampa on the road, 3-point win at home against New England. In a game, mind you, without Mac Jones, in a game where Brian Hoyer was named the starting quarterback, goes out with a concussion, and then Bailey Zappi comes in, and that game was only 3 points of a victory for Green Bay. And then, of course, they're on a 5-game losing streak. Giants, Jets, Commanders, Bills, Lions. At least 2 of those feel like winnable games to me, even if they were road games. So Packers, I think probably would be my answer for the most disappointing team. I think the team that, at least for me personally, I'm gonna give a little hate to is the Indianapolis Colts, a team that I perennially pick as a winner out in the AFC South. I mean, looking at their schedule, sure, you can maybe chalk up some of it to being that it is a tough schedule. Titans, they played the
beat the
Titans
best team they
twice.
played.
They beat the Kansas City Chiefs, which is absolutely massive. But then you look at some of the rest of these games, they've lost 2 to the Titans. So basically, they have to have a 3-game lead. They have to make up 3 games on the Titans to win the division. So that's pretty much flushed. I mean, losing against the Commanders at home, losing against Jacksonville, tying the Texans for crying aloud. And then in the course of this, they have benched the quarterback that they went out and got in Matt Ryan. They have fired their head coach, Frank Reich, and replaced him with Jeff Saturday, who has coaching experience on any level.
That's right.
Just played center for them for 13 years, snapping the ball to Peyton Manning. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of osmosis that goes on, but I don't think that's how information gets entered into the that's beside the point. I'm getting a little far afield. I think Colts absolutely deserve to be up there on the list of most disappointing teams as well, which, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like, should they be if they consistently do this to me? But I'm going to say, yeah, Colts are right there with the Packers as most disappointing team as well.
Yeah, I'll just counter this on the Colts. And that's why what the Giants and Jets are doing goes against everything that makes sense. Because, Seattle, Geno Smith playing so well, maybe surprising. Kirk Cousins playing so well in Minnesota, maybe a little bit surprising. Probably shouldn't be because he's a good player with great targets. But the Giants and Jets are 2 teams essentially winning without passing game, without quarterbacks. But if you exclude those teams, you look at both the history, but more importantly, the recent history of the NFL, the teams who win games typically have the best quarterbacks. I mean, look at some of the other best teams right now, like Eagles. You look at the Chiefs, the Bills. I mean, even like Seahawks right now, Geno's playing like one of the best players in the league. You look at, the Dolphins when Tua has played. All these like good NFL teams typically have good quarterbacks. And obviously the Giants and Jets are just such an anomaly out there in New York. I don't know what's in the water, but I mean, the reason why for me, like, I agree the Colts are disappointing to an extent, but I can't group them with these other teams because they haven't had a good quarterback since Andrew Luck. They've had a bunch of like no-name players, and then they went from no-name players to getting veterans who are well past their prime. Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz. He's not even that old, but it feels like he's a veteran because he's been around a while. And then Matt Ryan. And to be honest with you, I'm interested to see if they go back to Matt Ryan because Sam Ehlinger in that last game was horrendous, like worse than Matt Ryan. So something to think about there. They haven't had the quarterback, hard to win without one. Jonathan Taylor also has been hurt a lot for the Colts. I know, hard to make excuses, but if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a top 5 running back in the NFL consistently in the lineup. Kind of
hard to win.
Kind of hard to win. But a lot of disappointing teams, a lot of surprising teams. Really speaks to the parity of the league and a lot of close games this year and a lot of games, the under-hitting. We're talking about offense. The defense has had a little bit of a revival this year in the league. So it just makes everything like so wildly unpredictable. And truly, I think last year, we probably identified as the Steelers maybe as a team that wouldn't make a run in the playoffs. There was maybe one or two others. This year, I mean this with all sincerity. Again, I'm going to pick the Chiefs. You know me. I'm a Mahomes guy. I'm a Chiefs guy. But the truth is, if you get in the dance, you've got a true shot to win this year, more so than any other year. I don't look at one team that will make the playoffs versus one team necessarily having no chance or one team being so far ahead of the rest, which is great to watch.
Yeah, well, speaking of, parity, upsets, surprising teams, we have the second iteration of the college football playoff. And, not really a whole lot to discuss in terms of merit because the four top undefeated teams are in this playoff ranking of Georgia after their victory over the Tennessee Volunteers, Ohio State, Michigan. Neither team has stumbled yet, so that's just making an already massive matchup at the end of the month of November looking bigger and bigger and bigger and more exciting. And then how about this? The Big 12 getting to represent a little bit. The interesting thing out of this, I think, is just on a whim, I went and pulled up the preseason rankings for the college football rankings. Tennessee not in the top 25. TCU, just going through again really quickly, not in the top 25, and here we are, a week 11, most of the way through the year, and here these two teams are. Well, at least TCU is in, and Tennessee, they were in last week, and with their loss to Georgia, now are the next team to just kind of step up at 5-1.
For 5.
So I guess maybe that's where the conversation should start. Is kind of like in this next wave. I think it's pretty clear Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU all deserve to be in as of right now. But then the next, say 4 or 5 teams of Tennessee, Oregon, LSU, USC, even Alabama and Clemson. I mean, maybe the window's shut on those two teams who I think we both had in there as our preseason college football
I took
playoff.
out Clemson, went with USC. But I had
that sounds like I probably did the same thing.
Yeah, USC out of Clemson.
So, basically, are those teams? I mean, we've got USC 8-1. I don't think they have a single ranked win. Alabama 7-2, both losses within the SEC. Clemson 8-1, in a pretty soft ACC. So I guess, it's kind of up to you where you want to take the conversation.
Yeah.
Is the book closed on those teams officially? Are we looking at about 8 teams or 7 teams that have a legitimate chance? How do you think that kind of like the next 5 to 10 in that range that shook out?
Yeah, so first off, TCU, by the way, this is why I got to start betting college football on our betting locks of the week. The team that I have bet on the most successfully at any level in football is TCU. Here's what you do with TCU. They're going to start bad. You look for an in-game line on TCU. That's what I did against Texas Tech. It was like 7-all early in the game. I took TCU minus 9.5, and they won by, I don't know what it was, 14, 17, whatever it was, but it worked. So TCU is the number 1 team to bet on. They have been my luckiest team. I think I bet on 4 times this year, and I've won all 4. I cannot say that about any other team at any level. So TCU Horned Frog, shout out to you on being a smart betting team. A few things stand out to me, Tom Castleman. I 100% agree. There's 4 undefeated teams in the country. They're in the top 4. TCU has had the most close games. They're 4th. Georgia beat Tennessee. They're 1st. Ohio State has been convincing, but hasn't beaten too many people. Michigan, convincing, hasn't beaten too many people. That 2-3 rankings are fair. So one thing that stands out, Tom, is the ACC is out. Things have to really, really go beyond good. They've got about a 0.1% chance of making the playoff. Clemson losing to Notre Dame big. A Notre Dame team that has, 3 losses this year has not been great. No other ACC team other than number 10 Clemson is in the top 10 right now. So ACC, everybody else has to lose for the ACC to get a spot. So I'm going to say they're out. Big 12 has their hopes on TCU being undefeated. Next closest team in the Big 12 playoff rankings is Texas at 17, and they've got 3 losses. So we'll have, if TCU runs the table, they're 4th right now, they'll make the playoff. TCU, who by the way is an underdog against Texas, Maybe I should put this in my locks of the week to bet TCU. I guess
Sure.
now I'm regretting I hadn't, but I don't know who's going to win that
There's
game.
still time.
But TCU, realistically, probably not going to run the table. If they lose a game, then we won't have a Big 12 representative. So this opens the door. Right now, the one conference couple conferences that have the door open, it's the SEC, the Big 10, and the Pac-12. So Big 10, Michigan, again, we're jumping the gun here. As we've seen in sports this year, you shouldn't assume you do that, you make a blank out of you and me. But on paper, Michigan should lose at Ohio State. If Michigan loses to Ohio State, they will not be in the Big Ten championship, assuming Ohio State runs the table. I'm just going to make that assumption right now. Ohio State goes undefeated. Michigan has one loss. Tennessee has one loss. They will not make the SEC championship game if Georgia runs the table. So one loss, Tennessee, one loss, Michigan have a chance to get in the playoff if TCU doesn't run the table. I think Ohio State and Georgia are the two teams squarely in. The door is open for the Pac-12 right now. It is the first time in college football playoff history that there are 4 Pac-12 teams in the top 13. You got Oregon at 6, one loss to Georgia in the offseason. That's a great loss. Oregon wins the rest of the games. They're in the playoff. USC is 8th. UCLA 12th. Utah 13. So you talk about USC. They run the table, beat Oregon. They're probably in. Their only loss was a 1-point loss at Utah. So Pac-12 has a shot. Oregon or USC has a real chance to get in this playoff for sure. And then as for Alabama and LSU, it's not completely over for Alabama. But it's weird to say this because for the longest time, Tom, I've been a firm believer that Alabama is a top 4 team every single season. They're a top 2 or 3 team every single season. For the first time, and this will be surprising to you because I'm a Bama lover, for the first time, I could probably say that Alabama might not be a top 4 team because their defense, as you alluded to, is not what they used to be. Game on the line, Alabama defense comes up big in past years. This year, no. Game on the line against Tennessee, game on the line against LSU. Alabama's defense doesn't come up with the big play. So they're number 7. Obviously, they got to win every other game. But again, the committee is setting it up where if Alabama, wins the SEC championship, they could make the playoff. With that said, Alabama or LSU would not beat Georgia in the SEC championship. I think right now Georgia is squarely better. So we're going to remove Alabama and LSU from my rankings. I'm going to say that we're going to have Georgia, Ohio State. We'll get a Pac-12 champion, which I actually think might be USC. And then we're going to get the 4th team. It's probably going to be Tennessee. Even without playing in the conference title game, Tennessee runs the table. One loss at Georgia. You got to put them in.
See, I think it gets a little bit more wide open as it's going to have to because somebody's going to lose that Michigan-Ohio State game. And I'm not super convinced that the loser of that game makes it in the college football playoff. Like, this is where...
Not over Tennessee, though. That's what I'm saying.
This is where, I kind of differ from the college football committee because, we're most likely we're not going to have Tennessee and we're not going to have the, loser of Michigan-Ohio State.
I can see Tennessee getting in though. They're 5. They're set up.
Yeah,
to
but
get
they're not
in.
playing in. They're not playing in their conference championship. So yeah, they only have one loss. But if say like Michigan, let's just say it's Michigan and Tennessee, that have both lost. They only have one loss on the season. And even if Georgia and Ohio State happen to lose in those conference championship games, I still would take both of those teams over the one loss that you did not play in that championship game. And maybe from a strength of schedule standpoint, Clemson's done. But, if you take a one-loss conference champion in Clemson, from just a meritocratic standpoint, I have a hard time putting them or having them sit out while you put in Tennessee, while you put in Michigan. So I think the door's still open for Clemson. Obviously, it's still open in the Pac-12 for, say, Oregon or USC. USC is going to have to like prove it because they have that loss to Utah. They're going to have to put together, a solid string throughout the rest of the season, win the conference championship, etc. Um, Honestly, I could see a path for Ole Miss, perhaps. They've got a game against Alabama where if they're able to go in and win that one, they could be in the college football playoff if they're able to win in the SEC championship game. I think for Alabama, it probably has to be close. There's too many teams that are sitting there with no losses, with one loss, that are actually going to be playing in their conference championships. I think the committee will do their best to move heaven and earth. I don't even know if that's necessarily enough to get Alabama in because, like you said, this is not the same Alabama team that we're used to seeing. This is an Alabama team that struggled at home against Texas A&M, that struggled in Texas. They have some solid wins, of course, but they also have some really short losses as well. Where maybe that's where you say, oh, they only lost in overtime to Tennessee. They only lost on by 1 point at LSU. Maybe that's something where the college football committee is going to say, "Hey, we can finagle enough things to get Alabama in here because we know that was what draws eyeballs." I think some freshness, some variety. I really hope the committee stays away from that temptation to keep Alabama in, simply because we have so many other good teams that I think are absolutely worthy. I mean, and TCU, if they happen to run the table on their conference schedule and lose in their conference championship game, I think that's going to be a challenge. But you look at the resume, I mean, they have a number of top 25 wins where you've got, Oklahoma and Kansas State and Oklahoma State. And of course, they have their matchup in Texas. Those are all really quality wins. And so when you stack up a resume against other teams, I think even if they have one loss in the championship game, for example, or maybe if they stumble and lose at Texas but win the championship, I still think that Big 12 can represent over some of these non-conference championship winning teams. So it's just going to be interesting to see kind of where the committee's putting value if they want to pay any lip service to, hey, you won your conference, and even if you have a loss, just like Tennessee has a loss, you played in the big game and they didn't, type of thing. So it'll be interesting to see.
So I think that I'm looking at this closely, Tom. Right now, I've got it pulled up on my phone. That's why I'm looking down. Easier than pulling it up while we're talking
For
here.
sure, yeah.
But LSU lost the first game of the season against Florida State. It was a new coach. They lost by one. They had essentially one bad half. The committee looks at what are teams when you play them. LSU is actually a great football team. They just had a bad week one. LSU won over Alabama. They won by 25 over Ole Miss.
Yeah, so they're still very much in it.
They're in it, but let me tell you why Tennessee's going to get in without playing in the conference championship. They beat Alabama. Alabama, first time since 2019, they've got two conference losses. Alabama will beat Ole Miss. I'm telling you that right now, Tom. Alabama's beating Ole Miss this weekend. I'm guaranteeing that. Alabama's not losing two straight games. LSU beat Alabama. They smothered Ole Miss. What did Tennessee do against LSU? They went into one of the toughest environments in college football. They beat them 40-13. 40-13. Tennessee, that is one of the wins of the year. Anytime you beat Alabama, huge win on your resume.
Sure.
I know they didn't look great against Georgia, but if you have one loss to the best team in the country, you're out there beating LSU on the road by 27. You're beating Alabama. I mean, they won at Pitt on the road. They clobbered Kentucky 44-6. Kentucky was ranked 6th in the country. They won at Auburn. Again, not the same team it was, but another road SEC win in a tough environment. Tennessee, to me, if we're looking at who are the top 4 teams in the country, Tennessee is definitely a top 4 team in the country, and they might even be better than Alabama. I mean, we could honestly have Tennessee and Alabama both being top 4 teams in the country, but Bama's got the 2 losses. Tennessee's got the head-to-head win. I am struggling. I mean, the SEC is the best conference in football.
Sure.
We know this. You can say all you want, media bias SEC. Look at these squads. Like, who did Alabama lose to? They lost to some great teams because they play in the SEC. So I struggle not putting in Tennessee
Mhm.
in the college football playoff. I think they're going to get in because you look at who they play down the stretch. They play Mizzou, they play South Carolina, they play Vanderbilt. They will win all these games. They will get in the playoff. They'll have the 4 seed, 3 seed. Tennessee, to me, is deserving because all these other teams, TCU
Mhm.
will lose, Michigan will lose. These Pac-12
Well,
teams will beat each other up. ACC is, toast. Tennessee, I think, is going to make this playoff.
I mean, that's kind of assuming a lot. I mean, let's say,
That's what we
like
got to
looking at
do. We're here to
Oregon, like,
assume.
well, but like Oregon could win out. USC could win out. You've got a one-loss Pac-12 champion. Obviously, somebody's going to lose in the Big Ten. If you have Georgia, Big Ten winner, say an undefeated, Texas, TCU, and then a one-loss Pac-12,
Right.
that kind of has to leave Tennessee on the
And I think
outside, right?
that's what I'm saying. TCU is going to lose. One loss Pac-12 and Tennessee both get in is what I'm thinking. TCU's had so many close calls. They
Mhm.
will lose eventually. I'm looking at the schedule right now. Oregon, let's see, Oregon, USC. So the Pac-12 now does it where they don't have divisions. The top 2 teams play each other in the championship.
Mhm.
However, Utah is 5-1. They've got the head-to-head win against USC. So
Yep.
actually, USC may not even get in the Pac-12 championship. Oregon would beat Utah though. So if Oregon beats Utah, they're in. Let's see, USC wins at UCLA. We've got an Oregon USC Pac-12 title game, which is what I think will happen. And that winner gets in. I agree with that point. I don't think that TCU runs the table. And that's where Tennessee maybe gets that 4 spot. That would be interesting though, because then
Mhm.
Georgia should be the number 1. Are they going to do the SEC 1-4 matchup? Because I don't know what happens there. Maybe they argue that Ohio State should then be number 1 just so that you avoid that
Yeah.
matchup.
The
I don't know.
committee will contrive and get things the way they want, exactly the way they want them. And this year, actually, some pretty good teams to comply. I mean, they're not going to have Cincinnati to rain on their parade because other teams in the Power Five didn't step up and kind of quash that last year. So the committee will have a number of ways that they can kind of finagle things as we get toward the end of the season here. Going to be fascinating to see if any of these teams in the top 4 stumble down the stretch here, if there are any more surprises along the way with some of these top 10, top 15 teams. If any of them are able to kind of like rise up over things and we see some surprises as we have like a one-loss UCLA, as you mentioned, a one-loss Ole Miss. Do they have slim margin? Of course, but do they have a chance per se in still controlling their own destiny? It's going to be really, really fun to see, and it all starts on this Saturday. So plenty of great matchups on that front. Switching gears now away from the gridiron into the diamond. World Series just actually wrapped up. Astros, the last time we did a show, they were down 2-1 in the series.
And we jinxed
And
them.
we said, let's go Phillies. And the Astros said, we will take this 3-game sweep to close things out. And you can enjoy that one. So I guess, what was perhaps the key to the Astros bouncing back in this World Series? Was it more that the Astros took it back, that the Phillies let it go? Where are you kind of landing on that one?
Yes, I mean, maybe the biggest reason was that we both picked the Phillies to win, especially that I picked the Phillies to win because I always go with the favorites. I got caught up in the storyline Castleman train,
Mm-hmm.
and I went Philly to win. So I think that's part of it. I mean, the biggest turnaround was definitely their pitching. And I think part of it was, I don't know, it was weird. They blew a 5-0 lead in game 1, which was kind of crazy. They allowed 5 home runs in game 3 that might be like tipping their pitches. The pitcher was whatever. But look at what they did since. They got a no-hitter in game 4, second ever no-hitter in World Series history. I think the first combined no-hitter.
Mm-hmm.
Then they allowed 2 runs in game 4, or 2 runs the next game, and then 1 run the final game, right? The bullpen was lights out. In 10 innings, they allowed 1 run the rest of the way in this series. Verlander got back on track, had that bad start, the game 1. He looked like himself. They actually only scored 22 runs in this series over 6 games. That's 3.5 runs per game. Even in the wins, they scored 17 runs in the 4 wins. That is like 4 runs per game, just over. So they didn't do much on offense. They didn't really make offensive adjustments. I think that a lot of it was that the Phillies just had a couple home runs, a couple big innings, and they eliminated the home run ball. And not that the Phillies were really hitting the ball at all the whole series. They were only getting their runs from home runs. And the Astros said, we're not going to let you hit home runs anymore. And that's what was the difference. I do want to give a shout out to Dusty Baker. I think he has cemented his Hall of Fame career now. I would have put him in the Hall of Fame even before this World Series, but any question marks about Dusty Baker as to whether he's a Hall of Famer or not are now gone. But yeah, I mean, I think the Astros just did what they do. They pitched really well, and the Phillies are so used to power. They're not necessarily one of the best average hitting teams in the league. Kyle Schwarber, perfect example of who the Phillies are. The guy will not hit well, but when he hits it, it'll go a long way. They didn't hit well the whole series, but that one game, they hit 5 long balls, and that's how they got the 7 runs. So good comeback for the Astros. The better team did finally win in one of these baseball playoff series. I think more than half the series so far in the playoffs, the lesser team, the underdog, won. This time around, top dog, the better team did win the World Series. And I knew the Astros were the better team. I just had seen enough of this upset stuff and enough of the hot hand that I was thinking maybe Philly pulls it out. But Houston definitely deserved the title. They were the best team in the World Series, if not the best team in baseball. Definitely Houston and LA are the top dogs.
Absolutely, yeah. You basically took like the top point that I had, where we talk about the variance of a short series, of a 7-game series, and how regular season determines who's the best team in baseball, and the World Series determines who's the winner of that tournament. And Astros, it actually worked out that the better team won. I think that obviously more depth means that you have a tougher lineup to face. You have a stronger rotation. You have more variance in the bullpen. I think a really interesting point that John Smoltz brought up, as Yordan Alvarez hits that crushing 3-run home run against Alvarado, I think it was, on the Phillies, where when you're seeing, we have these high leverage bullpen arms, and so of course you want to go to them in those high leverage, really important moments. But when you see the same reliever 2, 3, 4 times in a series, that increases your chances as a hitter of having more and more success throughout as the series carries on. Because typically, in a regular season, you're playing, 3, maybe 4 game set against somebody. First off, it's regular season, so you're not always going to be getting the top guys every single game. So you're only going to be seeing a best reliever 1 or 2 times in a series. And even then, it's kind of at different points in the lineup. I mean, Thompson, the manager for the Phillies, was consistently going to his top left-handed pitcher against against Yordan Alvarez. So Yordan's got, this guy all timed up. He's like, oh, great, we're in game 6 here. I know exactly what this guy is going to try to do to me. And of course, we see almost dead center shot for a 3-run home run. And that's simply what it came down to, is that the Phillies had really good top-end talent, not necessarily as good of depth. And that showed as the series went longer and longer and longer. And, praised the Phillies for how they handled pitching in game 1, stealing that first game. Definitely, I thought it kind of galvanized and set the tone for the Philadelphia Phillies. But on the flip side, in retrospect, it really highlights how valuable it is for the lesser talented team, the underdog team, to snatch as many early victories as possible. Because as the series goes on, as you get a larger and larger sample size, the better team is going to win out in the long run. The more talented team is going to win out in the long run. So I think it was definitely all on the Astros for going out and winning the series. It doesn't really feel like Philadelphia blew it or anything by that stretch of the imagination. It was just over 7 games, the better team actually won. And then you highlighted, Astros, are they the best team in baseball? I think the only other team really in that conversation is, as you mentioned, the LA Dodgers. You could maybe make some arguments across the board, but I mean, for me, it's like you look at the Yankees, you take away Aaron Judge and the amazing season he had, and they kind of played mediocre baseball through most of the year. Maybe out in the The NL East with the Braves and the Mets, you could say maybe those are the top teams, but it really feels like it's Astros and Dodgers, doesn't it?
Yeah, so since 2017, the Astros have four World Series appearances and 2 World Series wins. Dodgers have 3 World Series appearances and 1 title. Obviously, that 2017 Astros title comes with an asterisk, the cheating
Hmm.
issues. 4 of those 6 years, including the last 3, Dodgers a better regular season mark. LA also has 10 straight seasons making the playoffs. In those 10 years, Houston has 7 playoff appearances. So the dominance is pretty close. I think the Dodgers have been a little bit better in the regular season where we truly kind of see who is the best team. The Astros have probably been a little bit more clutcher with the 2 World Series titles and 4 World Series appearances. But then again,
Hmm.
they had all those ALCS appearances. Some of the years they didn't make it. So it's tough to say. It's like 1 and 1A. I think LA has just a little bit better talent if you look at the MVPs, etc. But Houston's been a little bit better in the clutch department. What's more notorious? The titles. You go with the Astros,
Hmm.
as you and I talk about. Who's truly the best team in baseball? We see it in the 162 game season. We don't see it in the playoffs. That's for sure. So I could go either way, but it's kind of like you've got your class in the AL, you got your class in the NL, and those are the 2 best teams. We'll have some other champions mixed in just because it's baseball. We have upsets. Braves got the upset, last year, but I think the Dodgers are a little bit better. The Astros are a little bit clutcher. I don't know if that answers your question. I
Hmm.
might lean the Dodgers being just slightly better because I'm a firm believer that the best team you see over 162 games. Dodgers had a historic season this year. They couldn't come up in the clutch. That's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, it really is kind of parsing that question in terms of, best regular season, best postseason, putting it all together. What do you get? I'm going to go slightly, very slightly, of course, because we are talking about, like you said, 1 and 1A. I'm going to go with the Astros because the Dodgers clearly have a really deep, really talented team that feels like it's really built for just kind of outgrinding everybody else in the regular season. But then when you get to the postseason, when it's shorter rotation, when it's more about your top end starting lineup than it is about the depth and the versatility that you have in said lineup, really feels like that's where the Astros shine. Is they shine with their high leverage bullpen arms, the fact that they have a really deep pitching staff, maybe not necessarily all household names just yet. As you know, obviously Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw, they're kind of like the headline names, and then you kind of go beneath that, and you've got Framber Valdez, you have Jose Urquidy, you have a couple
Valdez
other
is really
guys
good.
for Houston that really show out well in postseason matchups. And then when you go to the Dodgers, it doesn't necessarily feel like they have that they have the dominant starting pitching in the sense of they can own a single game. Like over the course of a full season, of course, they're going to be an amazing pitching staff. But it feels like if you have to take 4 out of 7, Astros are the better team in that sense. So kind of like putting it all together, I'm going to go with Houston as being slightly better than the Dodgers, combining postseason and regular season. Dodgers have to find a way. I mean, they got one title, but it feels like they really should be picking up.
We should have more.
Like they should have more
Yeah.
at this point because you mentioned the number of MVPs that they have. Freddie Freeman, still really at the top of his game. Mookie
Mookie
Betts,
Betts
of
is
course.
a little bit regressed a little bit. Mookie Betts has still
Yeah,
very good.
yeah.
Cody
Cody
Bellinger has
Bellinger.
regressed greatly. He has regressed
Yeah,
greatly from an MVP player to a 9 hitter on that lineup. So
yeah. So it really feels like they should be better in the postseason than what they have been. But I mean, that's why they have this series. I mean, of course, an outstanding season for the Dodgers, just outscoring everybody by like 350 something runs,
yeah,
give or take, something like
crazy.
that. But like you said, Astros came up when it mattered, so that's why I give them a slight edge to the Dodgers. But I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer on that front
Yeah,
at
they
all.
beat him head to head in the World Series in 2017. 7 game series though. Like how much did the cheating matter? Did it choose? Did it dictate a game? I don't know, but
I think that it did,
yeah,
particularly the Yu Darvish game where he got no swings and misses on his I think it was like his slider. And that
Yeah.
was such an out. It was like 0 for 26 where he threw the slider. It was out of the zone, and the Astros didn't swing at it. And when you compare it when he was throwing at the rest of the season, the swing and miss rates on it, I think it played out in a significant enough way for at least one game or
Yeah,
one
but
starter.
that changes the discussion. Then Dodgers have
That
2
would.
titles, Astros have 1.
That
So
would, but we
like
can't we
so
can't really judge on that because we don't actually really know for sure. I only have my suspicions because I really
yeah
don't like the Astros.
yeah. So anyways, that's true. Well, let's move on to a little NBA. We'll get this one in pretty quickly, but I think
Sure.
it's a good talking point. I always love these starts. Are they for real or are they fluky type deals?
Yeah, so we've got the Bucks off to a fast start. Milwaukee starting the season 9-1. I think they were 9-0 coming when you mentioned that they their first loss of the season was the most recent game.
When I
So
put before I made the rundown, they're undefeated. Would have made
mhm.
a better talking point if they're 10-0, but still 9-1. They're
Still
still
nine and
on
one
pace for an incredible
is
season.
73 wins in their sight. Do you think that's something that we can be touching on at some point, or what do you think?
So it's going to be close. A lot of it goes down to how much do they want the 73 wins versus how much do they want the championship? Do they think they can get both? I mean, the reasons why they can do it is that they are 9-1 without their second best player, Chris Middleton, injured. They play the best defense in the NBA, number 1 in scoring defense this year, which, as you like to say, Tom, it translates game to game. Defensive skill and effort. Even if you have a cold shooting night, you can win some games that maybe you wouldn't win otherwise because you play great defense. So that's why they can do it. The reason why they wouldn't do it is because the NBA is so tough over a long season. There's so many great players. You look at a lot of these teams, even some of the bad teams in the NBA, they've got a lot of really good players. How the NBA right now is all about the 3 ball. Someone gets hot in a given game, you lose. The other reason why, and I'm leaning why they don't get the record, is they're 9-1, but they are 7-0 at home. They've only played 3 road games so far this year, so that definitely is advantageous to them. I say they get 68 to 70 wins, and they get the championship, which is for them probably more important. I mean, that 72-10 Bulls team came with the championship. 73-9 Warriors came without the championship. So obviously, the Bulls season was more impressive.
Mhm.
So I think that the Bucks have a shot at this record. If they really want to pursue it, they might get it. But I mean, they did rest Giannis. I know it was a minor injury. I know they were playing the Thunder, I think, a few days back, but it maybe showed you that they are maybe willing to rest Giannis when they kind of want to. I know he's not going to rest much, but that right there maybe tells you, what are they actually after? Which I think in Milwaukee, I mean, we forget that Milwaukee, the year they won the championship, they weren't the 1 seed. But I want to say the 2 years before that, they were the 1 seed and
Mhm.
they choked. So they've actually done better in the playoffs when they're not necessarily the higher seed. They don't necessarily have the great record. I do think they'll go in as the 1 seed this year. This time, I do think they'll win the championship. But 73 wins is just a lot of wins in the NBA, like the NFL, like the MLB. There is a lot of parity. The gap has been closed. 73 wins for me sounds like a mark that's too hard to get to.
Yeah, they're off to a hot start to be sure, but I'm going to say let's pump the brakes on that one. I mean, the 71-72 Lakers won 33 games in a row and finished 69-13. You look at the current regular season record, the Golden State Warriors back in 2015-2016. They didn't have their first loss until December, oddly enough, on the
Against the
road
Bucks.
to the
I
Bucks.
remember it.
So that's one where they won a title a couple years ago. Could very well have been in the finals last year had it not been for a Chris Middleton injury. But single season record, that's off the table for conversation for me, at least until kind of the midway point of the season, if not a little bit even later on in the year. It'd be one thing if say they're 10-0, 15-0, something like that, because the Warriors, they got off to that really, really hot start where they won the first, what was that, 24 games of the season. So for me, a little too early to be pumping or to be goosing up the Bucks as setting any sort of records, but I mean, could they do it? Maybe. But like you said, I just don't think it's really a priority for anybody because championships are what matter.
Agreed. All right, betting locks. Betting locks of the week.
Let's
Not
keep the
a good
recap
week
really
last week.
short. We don't need the people's rubbing our face in it.
Yeah, gosh, what a tough week last week. 2-1 for me, 2 losses in a tie. Tennessee plus 8.5 at Georgia. Georgia winning 27-13. I was hoping for a backdoor cover late for Tennessee. It just didn't happen. Dolphins -5 at the Bears. Dolphins winning 35-32. There were multiple points in that game where the Dolphins were up double digits, but they just couldn't close the gap there. Justin Fields, to his credit, man was amazing. Amazing what happens when you let the quarterback do what he's best at, running the ball. I know they haven't thrown the ball enough in Chicago, but they weren't running with the quarterback enough. Justin Fields, ironically, our quarterback, Tom, really barbecuing our bet here. Falcons +3 against the Chargers. Speaking of barbecue, Falcons were up, late in that game at one point, couldn't hold on to the lead, ultimately losing 2017 on a late field goal. That one washed out for me. You had the Dolphins one, missed that one. This one was pretty bad, admittedly. Phillies Astros game 4. You had the Phillies winning. They got no hit, 5-0. And then this one you really got barbecued because you took it at the wrong time. Vikings
Yep.
-3.5 at the Commanders. I did drop to 3 before kickoff. So you could have at least gotten a wash, but you lost by half a point instead. Tough week for both of us. I am 92% sure we're going to regroup this week. The show is going to go at least 4-2. At least 4-2 this week.
Well, you haven't heard my locks yet. I'll get the ball rolling. I'm going to be
Okay.
staying away from lines. I'm going all for point totals.
Oh, boy.
Give me the Buccaneers and the Seahawks under 44. We talked about how unders have been coming in at a higher rate throughout the season. Plus, they're going to be in Germany. I know that they're going to be traveling with plenty of time to try to get adjusted, but still, you're just literally and figuratively a foreign place, and I think that's going to be difficult. We have a Bucks team that has kind of struggled to put up points in spite of having as many weapons as it does. Certainly, they are not running the ball well, which leads to much shorter possessions. And then, of course, the Buccaneers defense still has a lot of great talent on that end. So I could see this one being a low-scoring affair, under 44 points. And then I know how I mentioned how unders are coming in, but I'm going to go with a couple of overs here. I'm going to go with Rams and Cardinals over 43. I think that I don't know. I think that these teams are both kind of like due, so to speak, to be putting up some points. Cardinals don't really seem to be very special on defense, which kind of lends to a bit of a bounce back game for Matt Stafford. And then, of course, with DeAndre Hopkins coming back, Kyler Murray has a really nice go-to target on that side of the ball as well. James Conner getting a little bit healthier as well, running. So I think there's going to be some more balance. I think that we can get to like a 24-21 type of a game, to say the least. And then I'll go with Bills-Vikings over 45.5. I'm not really trusting the Vikings defense all that much. I am trusting Kirk Cousins knows how to get the ball to Justin Jefferson. They added T.J. Hawkinson, of course. Dalvin Cook, you got a lot of playmakers. And then the Bills, of course, Josh Allen. This is assuming he's not having any issues with that UCL. He injured his elbow toward the end of that last game, but you've got big plays with Stephon Diggs coming home to Minnesota. Gabriel Davis, a big play threat as well. So I'll take over 45.5 for Bills and Vikings.
Now, Gabe Davis is very up and down. I'm first place in our fantasy league, but you never know what you'll get out of him as a Gabe Davis fantasy owner. I'll say this. I think the Cardinals-Rams one is not going to work out for you. That's my gut feeling, just because I watched some of the Rams-Bucks game while I was at work, doing some work in the background. The Rams offense looks very anemic right now, looks very poor, but we'll see. Cardinals defense certainly not great. I agree with the other two, assuming that Josh Allen plays. Josh Allen doesn't play. I don't know about that over for sure. So I'm going to go with something a little different. I'm going to hit you with a little NBA, Tom Castleman.
Oh, nice.
NBA tonight, Nets -3.5 over the Knicks. Nets playing better ball of late. I don't know if it's Steve Nash being out as the head coach. Maybe it's Kyrie Irving being suspended, but it seems like there are 2 less distractions out there. Maybe the Nash was part of the problem with their defense. We know he's an offensive guru. Last 3 games, much better defensively. Allowed 86, 94, then 96 points against the great Mavericks offense. They blew out the Wizards by 42. They beat the Hornets by 4 and lost at Dallas by only 2. And Durant actually missed a key free throw that could have maybe tied the game late there. So they're at home in this game. The Nets, by the way, have won the last 7 games over the Knicks. Kevin Durant is 20-3 against the Knicks in his career. 12-game winning streak for KD. He just missed that late free throw. He's going to be fired up tonight. Look for maybe a 40-point game from Durant. Nets should win by 4 or more. No problem. Actually, I feel the best about this bet of any of my bets, which probably isn't a good sign because the NBA is such a make or miss league. The Nets are such a up and down team, but I like them to win by 4 over the Knicks. Then I'm going with a NFL under, like you said, a lot of unders hitting. Thursday night football. What has happened? Not all, but most of the weeks on Thursday night. Not a lot of points in prime time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that trend continues. Falcons, Panthers under 44. I know neither team is necessarily great on defense, but then again, neither is either team great on offense.
Sure.
So both teams run the ball a lot. We could see clock running quicker as they run the ball, not necessarily many explosive plays. So give me Falcons, Panthers under 44 points on Thursday night football. And then finally, even though I'm talking up Tennessee a lot, and they are great, I'm going to go with the alma mater here. The big lines, whether in college or NFL football, have hit a lot this season. Mizzou is a 20.5-point underdog at Tennessee. Last year didn't go great against Tennessee, but over the years, Mizzou's actually played Tennessee very tough. So huge spread. Look at Mizzou's games. They only lost by 4 against Georgia, which might be the most shocking result of the college football season. I get it, but Mizzou this year at least seems to play up to its competition or down to its competition.
Mm-hmm.
And look at their conference games in the SEC. 5 of Mizzou's 6 conference games have been decided by 7 points or less. The only one that wasn't 7 or less is when they won by 13. So I'm not putting money on Mizzou to win. Tennessee's going to win, but 20.5 is such a big number. And what is a rivalry game? Who are Mizzou's biggest rivals right now in the SEC? It's South Carolina and Tennessee. Guess what? They beat South Carolina. They'll play Tennessee tough. Tigers to cover 20.5. It was actually 21. It slipped by a half point. So if anything, that could go back up to 21. So give me Mizzou to cover at Tennessee.
All right. Sounds good on that front. Here's hoping for better because we can't really get any worse this week. Trivia time. So I've got a couple different good trivia ones. I think one's a little bit more evergreen. Let's see. Well, actually, I've got 2 that are based on the World Series. So we might be lining up on this one if your trivia is as topical as mine is.
It's not.
Okay, so mine is Dusty Baker has won the World Series now as a player and as a manager. Can you tell me how many other managers have accomplished this? And can you give me any names?
4.
A little higher.
6.
6 managers.
I can name some of them.
Okay,
Joe
go
Torre.
for it. Joe Torre is not one of them.
Okay, Yogi Berra.
Not Yogi. I'll say 5 of these guys have absolutely coached within like our lifetimes of watching baseball. So within the past 20 years.
Okay, last 5 of the 6, really?
5 of the 6, yeah.
Bobby Cox?
Nope.
Buck Showalter. I don't even know if he played. I'm thinking of guys who
I don't
won
know. I don't know if he
recent
did.
World Series.
Let's
Well,
see. I
Aaron
know
Boone didn't win with the Yankees.
he did
Joe
not. No.
Girardi.
Joe Girardi is one of them.
Okay, because he won the was he the manager for the '09 Yankees?
Yes,
Okay. I know he won with I think the Yankees too as a player, maybe.
I think
Okay.
so.
Joe Girardi is one.
Hmm.
Mm,
Let's see. I think one
Bob
of them,
Brenly,
not Bob Brenly, one of them is still actively managing.
actively managing.
Hmm.
Wow. Oh, Dave Roberts.
Dave Roberts, absolutely.
That's the active one, obviously. Yeah, he won with the Red Sox. Got that key stolen base,
Hmm.
that comeback against the Yankees. Now the Dodgers manager, Dave Roberts. Okay, so there's four more, and there's three more active, or not active, but recent guys.
Yeah, recently active. Yeah.
Recently active. Oh my
Let's
God,
see.
why am I blanking? Who's that Mets manager? Is it one of them a Mets manager?
No,
Not a Mets manager.
not a Mets manager.
Bobby Valentine is who I was going to say. I don't know if he played, but
I think he did, but I don't think he did not win as a player.
Oh,
Um,
well, okay. I don't know if he won or I don't know if they took it out. Pete Rose?
Not Pete Rose.
I don't know if he won as a manager.
No, I don't think he
But
did.
that's not
Let's see if I can. Let's see if I
yeah.
can come up
Give
with
me a
a
couple
hint.
clues.
Okay, so one of them is a. One of them used to manage in Chicago.
Ozzie Guillen?
Nope.
No, Tony La Russa. No. Am I on the right side of Chicago?
Nope. You're on the other side of town.
Okay, so north side. Lou Piniella.
Lou Piniella
Yeah.
is on that list.
He didn't win with the Cubs, but I remember he won as a manager. Lou Piniella, all right. So three more.
Three more. One of them is a former, or the two ones that are in recent memory, both managed in the American League.
Okay.
One of them won their World Series in the 2010s decade, and one of them won it in the 2000s decade.
2010s. American League 2010. Joe Madden?
Mm-mm.
No, because he won with the Cubs in 2010s. Who won the 2010s out of the American League in the 2010s?
Out of the American League, yep.
Okay, it's not the Alex Cora.
Alex Cora, indeed.
Yeah,
It's from the 2010s. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then the 2000s.
Yep.
American League.
American League.
Okay, so the Yankees won a lot in the 2000s, but it's not Joe Torre.
Correct.
So it's not the Yankees.
Not the Yankees.
Uh,
And we eliminated Ozzie Guillen, so not.
Oh gosh, why am I having a dumb moment? Is it the Angels manager?
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yep. I know who it is. I'm picturing him right now in my head. Oh gosh. Just give it to me. I gotta have
Mike Scioscia.
Mike Scioscia, that's it, the Angels manager. And the legend, any clue that might give it away? Or Casey Stengel. Casey Stengel.
Not Stengel. Let me see.
If there's a really good clue, otherwise you can just give it to me.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't even really know who this guy is. The name is Davey Johnson.
Is he a Yankees guy?
Most notably Baltimore Orioles.
Oh, okay.
So that's from the 66 and 71 World Series. And then I think he won. Did he win managing for the Mets? Because they won in 84, correct? Something like that.
Was that the Red Sox, like, through Buckner's legs? I don't know if that was the year. Because I think, didn't the Mets win that World Series?
No, 86 is when the Mets won.
And that was the Buckner one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that was the tough one where it's like, okay, I could give myself hints and not even really know who this guy is. But yeah,
believe Mike Scioscia did pretty good though with the clues.
Yeah, Dusty Baker and some legendary company. And it's fascinating how none of these guys are really known as being superstar players. I mean, I know Davey Johnson, from what I read, picked up a couple of all-stars.
The best coaches are usually not the best players.
Yeah.
I think Larry Bird was didn't coach for long. Larry Bird was very good as a coach.
Sure.
But for the most part, usually the best coaches, mean, Zinedine Zidane, Pep Guardiola, if we're going to go soccer, but I know you don't get those references as much. But usually the best coaches are not the best players. All right. So I've got an interesting question here. This is
Go for
not
it.
topical at all. But I mean, I was looking at Jalen Hurts again, 12 touchdowns is 12 touchdown passes for an MVP candidate right now. Again, I know he gets rushing touchdowns, but I was thinking in my head, like, well, what if he does win the MVP with like 20 touchdown passes? Like, that would feel wrong to me. So in my head, I thought, what is the least and second least touchdown passes? I guess, I don't know. I might give you the least because I think you might get this guy because it's such a small number.
Okay.
Bart Starr had 14 touchdown passes in 1966, won the MVP. That's the least ever won by an NFL MVP. What is the second least touchdown passes in an NFL MVP season, and who did it? It's two quarterbacks. One of them is way back in the day, but one of the best ever. And the other one is not a guy that played in the era that we watched, but right before it.
Okay.
So it is a more modern guy, which is shocking if you look at the year that he got this many touchdowns and got MVP. So second least touchdown passes in an MVP season. Let's start with the number first. That might help you.
Okay, so more than 14, but probably not by much. So like 16, 17 passes, touchdown passes? Oh, more than that. Okay. I'll say 19.
19.
Okay.
Second least touchdown passes in NFL MVP season. So I actually think you'll have a better time with the legend.
Yeah, so if I'm thinking about old legends, I would have to say like Johnny Unitas.
Yep, that's it. Oh, Johnny U. 1964.
Nice. Ward number 19.
Yeah. Now, this other guy is more modern. Given the era of quarterbacks he played with, this is shocking. And actually, I need to do more research and look into who else played in that season. But this is the one that's very surprising.
Okay. This might be a little too far back, but would it be like Ken Stabler?
Not Ken Stabler. A little bit further ahead of Ken Stabler, but not significantly, though. I mean, after Ken Stabler.
Was like, okay.
It's like the era after his, I think.
Yeah. I think like who would have been some of the top, like
it's a Hall of Famer, not Joe Theismann. You are getting warmer though. I think this guy won an MVP several years after Theismann, but you're in the approximate era. I would say
Phil
Joe
Simms,
not Phil Simms, but you're getting even warmer when it comes to era. A Hall of Fame quarterback, maybe top 10 all time. Although if you're a numbers guy like me, you dig into his numbers, you might say he's slightly overrated. But, I mean, I think
so maybe John Elway?
John Elway. 1987, 19 touchdown passes. Given that we had a few years before that, Dan Marino throws 48 and wins MVP. John Elway with 19 won the MVP.
That's not so good.
That's crazy, man. It is crazy. So something to think about. All right, statements of the week. I know you got to get back to work. I got some stuff to do. Let's get you in there first, and I'll make my statement.
Yeah.
I think you'll like mine. It's bold. I don't know if you'll agree with it, but I think you'll like it.
Well, my statement of the week is I now know what the rest of the world felt like when Jerry Reinsdorf stepped in and hired Tony La Russa to manage the White Sox. Even though Tony La Russa hadn't managed in about a decade, the Indianapolis Colts, Jim Irsay going ahead and saying, let's bring in Jeff Saturday. I like hanging out with him. I remember him from the Peyton Manning days. We need more of that. Peyton's not answering my phone calls, but Jeff picked up, so he is now our head coach. It is absolutely ridiculous that Jeff Saturday is the head coach. I mean, I'm sure nice guy, wonderful opportunity, but when you think about, I think it was Kyle Brandt on NFL Network who was saying this, when you think about how grueling and grinding the coaching profession is for the men and women that pursue that as their livelihood, it's difficult on them. It's long, late hours. It's difficult on their families for the same reason. You can be coaching in one city, in one state, 1 year, and then the next year, because you either got promoted or the coach above you got fired and you now need to find a new gig, it's a very transient job where you're moving around a lot, and to take somebody who has no coaching experience whatsoever and put them into the head coaching role of your football team is a slap in the face to all of the other coaching candidates available on your actual current staff. Even if you want to say, John Fox is like a special advisor to the defense, whatever, like you have other qualified people who have put in the time and the work that deserve the opportunity, that have earned, I shouldn't say deserve, have earned the opportunity to be coaching at this level in the NFL, and not to take it necessarily to the place of a place of diversity, but the fact that there are no safeguards or structures in place for the interim role that there are with the Rooney Rule in the offseason for making coaching hires, and the fact that this is the epitome of I know a guy who knows a guy, or just I know the guy, I know the billionaire who's going to give me this opportunity. I don't know if Jeff Saturday has expressed any interest in coaching before. If this is something where it's like, hey, let's float this idea to you, you're going to go ahead, leave your ESPN cushy gig, and you're going to come and coach the Indianapolis Colts. He's skipping literally all of the steps. He's going from not even playing the game to ending up at the finish line, so to speak. It's a ridiculous decision, a ridiculous move. And now the rest of the NFL gets to laugh at you, Indianapolis Colts. I can't imagine how Chris Ballard, their GM, feels. Can't really imagine that he would actually make this decision, given that his job could be a bit on the hot seat. I think if I'm the general manager of a team that's underperforming, I would want the best coach possible, not just anybody off the street. By the way, Common, just so you know, I'm not going to really be able to do the show anymore, as I'm going to be a university president at University of Chicago. So I think that's going to be taking up my time. I have no experience, haven't done the role. I'm taking Kyle Brandt's bit, I know, but yeah, just absolutely stunning move from the Indianapolis Colts, and really, I think a foolhardy turn, to say the least.
Let me devil's advocate this. I don't know how I feel on this, just because. So first off, as far as I heard, he did formerly have an advisor role with the Colts. Mm-hmm. So Jeff Saturday has been working with the organization. I agree with what you're saying about.
Is that current to this year? Because he's also with ESPN. That's kind of like a conflict of interest.
He's got both. That's what I had heard online. He was an advisor to the Colts. I think it's similar to like Dwayne Wade has like ownership with the Jazz, but he works for TNT. These days they do it differently. He did have a certain role within the Colts franchise right now. When you hear the way you say it, everything you're saying makes sense. I will counter this with you and tell you that being an NFL head coach is so much different than being an assistant coach. There are so many great NFL assistant coaches that, to be honest, are terrible head coaches. So, again, on paper, the resume, everything you're saying makes sense. With that said, I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of one guy who became maybe one of the all-time greatest soccer coaches, Pep Guardiola. Pep Guardiola, all-time player. He was, I think, for one season, he was the Barca B, or was it even Barca B or Barca C? He was the youth coach for their second-tier team in the second division. He essentially had 1 year of head coaching experience, not in the major league. They loved him so much. They made him the coach at Barcelona, and they had the greatest 4 runs in soccer history, 4 years of success that has never been achieved. So I know it sounds crazy, but it has worked before.
Well, he at least had some coaching experience, though.
I know.
Like Saturday doesn't really
have coaching experience, but again, we're talking 1 year. We're talking 1 year for Pep Guardiola. We have seen some of these NBA players go straight to coaches. I know it didn't work with Steve Nash, but on paper, what you're saying works. It makes sense. But I hate to do this whole game of who's going to be a great head coach, because there are many coaches who are coordinators who don't work out in the head coaching role. So years of experience as a great offensive or defensive coordinator do not translate to being a great head coach.
No.
And I don't know. I don't know Jeff Saturday personally. I don't know how well. I mean, Jim Irsay, I'm guessing, knows him pretty well. I like Jeff Saturday on ESPN personally. I think he sounds like a very smart guy. I know right now he is literally the laughing stock of the NFL,
Mhm.
but I just think that it's just a little bit unfair. Let's see how he does.
Well,
I know what you're saying,
yeah,
Tom.
I'm less concerned about the results and more concerned about the process and how this went around.
Sure.
Essentially, is what I'm getting. It's an extraordinarily flawed process that could work out. I mean, we discovered penicillin through by
Yeah.
mistake type of thing. It could work out.
I don't
I'm just
know.
saying in this particular instance that just flies in the face of everything that the NFL has
Sure.
ever done. Could work,
Sure.
but it certainly is a bad. I think a bad process for sure.
On paper, it sounds that way. The process has its
Mhm.
flaws for sure. I just think that uh, people are being a little harsh to Jeff Saturday. So we'll see what happens here as he becomes the head coach for the Colts. All right, I've got a statement, Tom, that I maybe call me a little biased, maybe call me caught up in the moment, but we're gonna have a little fun here, Tom Castleman.
All
So I
right.
got the one schedule pulled up on the computer. I'll pull up the next schedule here on my phone. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at the schedule.
Mhm.
So here's my statement of the week. I'm not saying they'll finish with the same record. I'm saying that the Chicago Bears will finish with a better record than the Green Bay Packers. They are both 3-6 right now. And right now, the Bears are playing better football. Do I dare say this? Right now, the Bears have the better quarterback in Justin Fields than Aaron Rodgers. Listen to Green Bay's schedule. Listen to Chicago's schedule. Green Bay plays the Cowboys, the Titans, the Eagles. Then they play at the Bears. They play the Rams, the Dolphins, the Vikings, then the Lions, who they just lost to. Now listen to Chicago's schedule. The Bears play the Lions, the Falcons, the Jets, the Packers, Philly, Buffalo, okay, but the Detroit, Minnesota. So they play the Lions twice.
Mhm.
Green Bay plays them once. Bears got the Falcons as well. They got, the Jets are better this year, but I think the Bears' schedule is a little bit easier down the stretch. And right now, they're just playing better football. So I know that it might mean that the Bears finish like 7-10, but they finish 7-10. That'll be better than Green Bay 6-11. Green Bay is a dumpster fire of a football team.
Mhm.
For the first time in a while, I can say this: the Chicago Bears are better than the Green Bay Packers right now. They'll beat them at Soldier Field. Aaron Rodgers will not be able to own the Bears in that head-to-head matchup. Bears get a better record than the Packers this year.
I can certainly hope so. It's funny as you were rattling off the teams. I was counting on one hand wins and one hand losses, and I ran out of fingers for the Packers' losses. So here's
That's what
hoping.
I'm saying, man.
Here's hoping that
I'm
bears through.
out.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, so that's the statement. Bears better season than
From
the
your
Packers.
lips, like.
Let's go. All right, Tom. I think that's gonna do it for us. This program. Great show. I know next week we have a little World Cup talk, which has me excited. So
It's going to be very, very little World Cup talk from
yeah,
me. That'll be
we'll have
the common show.
yeah NFL, college, World Cup, and more. I know in a couple weeks we'll have Thanksgiving off, so I think, but hopefully, ideally, we'll plan to have these shows every week again,
Mhm.
minus maybe the Thanksgiving break. So we'll keep you tuned. Salute Your Sports on YouTube, obviously, every week. Posted Wednesday, Thursday range. Thank you, Tom, for co-hosting, and thank you to everyone who listened, watched. You guys are awesome. We'll see you guys soon.